So my name's Claire and I'm a Western medical herbalist. I'm trained and registered and a member of NIM, which is the National Institute of Medical Herbalists. If you can't hear me, please say, because I tend to talk quite quietly, so please let me know. I trained in the Scottish School of Herbal Medicine in Glasgow, and then I did a year at Middlesex University in London. And when I finished there, I worked for a year in Southsea in an NHS pharmacy. And then when I moved over to the island, I became self-employed and I've got my own practice working from home. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what herbal medicine is generally, and then more specifically about making herbal teas. Has anybody here been to see a herbalist before? So do you know what to expect when you go to see a herbalist? No. So you basically get asked a lot of questions about everything, and some of the questions seem really directly relevant to what you've gone to see them about, and some of them seem a little bit more around about the houses, because a herbalist tries to build up a picture of your whole health, both your physical health and your mental health, and to see how you are as a person, and to try and get to the root cause of what's going on with you. So if you were asked to define what a herb is, how would you define herbs?
Something natural.
Something natural, okay. That could include minerals though?
A plant.
A plant, okay. That's probably the best answer I could have expected. A plant, because it depends who you're talking to really as to how you define what a herb is. If you talk to a botanist, then it's quite specifically a non-woody plant under 30 centimetres in height. Okay. If you're talking to an ecologist, then it might be a herbaceous layer in a forest. If you're a gardener, then it might be a herbaceous border. If you're a chef, it might be an aromatic culinary herb. But to a herbalist, a herb is essentially any plant or part of plant that can be used medicinally. Simple as that. In a lot of cases, it's not the whole plant that's used. So it might be the root, it might be the leaf, it might be the flower, the stems, or the seeds even. And we tend to use parts of plants and try and not damage the whole plant in the process. I think a lot of herbalists feel quite strongly that herbal medicine should be sustainable and responsibly sourced. So a lot of people won't use herbs that would kill the plant outright. For example, there are medicines that can be made from the heartwood of trees, but in order to get to that, you'd have to chop the tree down. So there are lots and lots and lots of plants that we can use medicinally, so there's often really good alternatives. So you've got lots of different plants. You've got things like the flowers of marigold, you've got things like barks from willow, vitex has a seed, milk thistle is the seed. So lots of different plants that we use in lots of different ways. And herbalists also use things like ferns and mosses and lichens and fungi as well. What about the definition of herbal medicine? That's quite broad as well, actually. In the broadest terms, if you were to look it up, herbalism is essentially the study and practice of the interaction between plants and humanity. That's massive. If you think about it, that includes forestry, plant dyeing, using plants for dyeing materials, carpentry. It could cover all sorts of interactions between humanity and plants. So in practice, herbalists restrict themselves, and I use that term loosely because it's a vast subject that is forever changing, to the study of the medicinal use of plants. And if you were to take a global view as well, you've got such a range of plants around the planet that most herbalists tend to specialise in one aspect in particular, and I have chosen to study Western medical herbalism, which is plants that I can find on my doorstep essentially, and I try and source whichever herbs that I use from the UK if I can, organic if I possibly can, and if I can't get UK organic, then somewhere in Europe. So herbal medicine essentially is the use of the whole plant preparation in the treatment of illnesses, with the intention of reaching the best health that that patient can have. Herbalists take a holistic approach, so we look not only at the symptoms that you come to us with, but we try to find the root of the illness. And we might be looking at diet, lifestyle, any medication that you're already on, to find out exactly what's going on. So one of the questions I often get asked is, am I a homeopath? And I'm not a homeopath. We work quite differently from homeopaths. I have nothing against homeopaths, but we use the whole of the plant. We don't tend to isolate constituents from a plant and just use one part of it. We use the plant in its entirety. So we'll take the whole leaf and use the whole leaf. And we can make a direct correlation if we were to analyse that leaf. We can make a direct correlation between the chemicals that are found within the leaf to the action that those chemicals would have upon the body. So herbal medicine can be used to support patients with both acute illnesses and chronic illnesses. And generally speaking, anything that you go to see a GP for, you could see a herbalist for. So it could be anything from eczema to menopausal symptoms to hay fever to headaches, anxiety, sleep issues, a whole broad range of ailments. If you are going to train as a medical herbalist, the study is 4 years of studying, with over 500 hours of clinical observed practice as well. And you study everything from anatomy, botany, differential diagnostics, pharmacy, the materia medica, so the plants as well, traditional uses of the plants, and you're looking at the modern research into the plants as well. So it's absolutely vast, and in honesty, 4 years, you're still studying afterwards, and you keep studying throughout because we're constantly getting more and more information coming through. And as I said, the world is so vast, there's so much information out there. So it's not a boring job by any means. That, and you don't know what's going to walk through your door from one day to the next. So it's estimated that somewhere around 75 to 80% of the world's population today are still using herbal medicine as their first line of defence against illness. That's a huge number, huge number. So you're looking at things like the fact that our Western medical model, a lot of our medications are actually based on herbal medicines, plant medicines, things like willow bark, originating with aspirin, and the digoxin, the digitalis from foxglove. So you've got the origins of modern medicines back into plant medicines. And herbal medicines existed for thousands of years, over 2,000 years, and we know this because we've got archaeological evidence of it. So I'm going to try and give you a little potted history, just a little bit, because a lot of our evidence for the use of herbs does come from archaeology. It's from things like pottery and tiles, and from texts and artworks. So sometimes the plants themselves are the focus of the subject matter, and sometimes they're just in the background of a piece of artwork, and with a bit of detective work you can see that the plants were used in a certain way at a certain time. So some of the earliest depictions of herb gardens that we have, for example, are from ancient Egyptian paintings. And there's one in the British Museum which dates back to 1400 BC. We know that herbs in ancient Egypt were used for ritual and were often grown around temples. And in ancient Persia, herbs were also used. And if you can think of the biblical hanging gardens of Babylon, we know that there was thyme, aniseed, rosemary, and quite a few other herbs that we would recognise today being grown there medicinally. If you look at ancient Greece, there's not a huge amount known about herb gardens other than they tended to be medicinal and that they were studied by the Greek physicians. But the Romans, on the other hand, built the origins of what later became formal European gardens, and herbs were grown in raised beds, including things like fennel and dill, coriander, rosemary, again herbs that we would recognise today. And we've got records that show that the Romans used those herbs not only for food flavouring but also medicinally. And I'm sure we've all heard the stories of nettles being used to warm the lower limbs. Sounds quite painful, but effective. If you look at medieval European history, we know that rich households always had herb gardens, and that the monks of the medieval period grew herbs in kitchen and medicinal gardens. And it's said that to the monks, gardening was of second importance to prayer, because they had such a reliance on these plants for medicine. If people were to come to the monks to be healed, they needed their medicines on hand in the garden. So the first monastic garden is thought to have been built in Egypt by St. Anthony in 350 AD, which I think is quite amazing. So if we sticking with the sort of religious use of medicines, by 1447 Pope Nicholas V had set aside part of the Vatican grounds for a medicinal garden, and that was used to promote the teaching of botany. And in 1597 there was a catalogue made of physic gardens by somebody called John Gerard, who was a herbalist, and he catalogued both the public and private physic gardens around in Europe, and he listed over 1,000 plants just in his physic garden in Holborn, and that's thought to be the first catalogue of that type that was printed. So then if you move forward a bit to the Renaissance, and through the Renaissance to the 1700s, you've got formal gardens coming into fashion in Europe, and they're found in the big grand houses essentially. But herbs were grown along with your fruit and flower trees, and some of those gardens had specific medicinal plant sections that were called herbularis or hortus medicus. And during that period, specific medicinal gardens called physic gardens were developed. You can think of the Chelsea Physic Garden as well. So they were usually grown at universities, and they were studied by medicine or botany students as well. So today, herb gardens, they tend to be purely functional gardens, mostly for kitchen gardens, but they might also have a blend of ornamental herbs. Herbs, typically we just use them for food, flavouring in cooking, but they can be used in other ways as well, like discouraging pests, ants and things like that, and providing pleasant scents, and obviously for medicinal purposes too. So why did I want to talk about herbal tea specifically? Because actually herbal medicine comes in such a wide range of guises. You've got tinctures, which is plant matter preserved in alcohol. You've got syrups, where it might be glycerin or sugar. Oxymels, where you might be using honey to preserve herbs. You can powder them, you can make decoctions, There's lots of different types of preparations, and each of those has got its own advantages. For example, a tincture might produce a preparation that has more resin content than a tea, for example. And sometimes you might want something powdered and put into a capsule for ease of taking, to be able to carry it around with you, or simply to make sure that the person taking it is going to take it. I like using herbal teas because they're easy to make and collect for yourself, and I think that's really important. I think it's really important that we know that we can grow things that help us to get better. It uses the aerial parts of the plant, so it's not going to kill your plant to trim a little bit off. And it means that you've got it there for repeated use. You've got your medicines in the garden all winter, or all summer dried, ready for the winter, however you want to take them. So the other thing about tea is that they make you stop. You have to stop to make a cup of tea, and you can take a little bit of time for yourself to relax, to breathe, to smell the tea, to look at the tea, to inhale the smell of the tea. And those moments are so rare in our busy, busy lives that it's really important. Teas have also got a really gentle action. They tend to be cumulative. So it's not a case of one cup of tea cures your ailment. You tend to have to take herbal teas over a period of time for those actions to build. And they also offer a really nice alternative to the caffeine drinks that we all drink too much of. Herbal teas are suitable to be taken pretty much by anyone, depending obviously on what the herb is. You can give a herbal tea to children, you can give them to adults, you can give them to anybody. They're not difficult to swallow, they don't contain alcohol, and on the whole they taste really nice. They're very simple to make. You need very few things to make them. You need good clean hot water and a kettle or pan to heat it with. You need something to drink it from, and ideally something to cover your container when you're infusing it, because a lot of plants contain volatile oils that if you pour hot water on, they get carried up in the steam, and you will lose those oils if you don't cover it while you're making your tea. So something like a cafetiere is kind of ideal because it puts a lid on the top, lets the steam condense and drop the oils back into your tea. One other thing to mention about making herbal teas is it's really ideal to use a dedicated teapot, because then you've not got the residual tannins from your black tea or a coffee stain in the inside of the pot, which the tannins will actually bind to some of the constituents of a herbal tea and stop you absorbing them or using them properly. So you want a clean container, preferably just used for herbs. It would change the flavour as well. If you've got a residue of coffee, you want a nice flavoured tea. So how do we know which plants to use medicinally? What does anybody know about how herbal medicines were determined in the first instance?
By accident.
By accident. Trial and error, essentially, I think so. I think the people that survived that trial and error passed their knowledge on, yeah. And there was probably some mishaps along the way, I would have thought. But there was, has anybody heard of Nicholas Culpeper? Yeah. Have you heard of his doctrine of signatures theory? Well, there was a belief that the Creator, the Almighty, whoever it is that you attribute that to, left signs amongst the plant world to tell you what was good medicine and what it was for. So Nicholas Culpeper, who lived in the 1600s, was a good advocate of this, and he wrote Materia Medica that explained this in his book. But there are examples of that, like if you can think of a garlic stalk, it's hollow, so it's meant to relate to a windpipe. So garlic was used for medicine to do with the throat and breathing. If you think of a walnut that's been shelled, what would that make you think of?
Right.
The heart.
The brain, yeah, the brain. So walnuts were thought to be good for the brain. There's a plant called Pulmonaria officinalis, which has large, broad green leaves with white spots on, and they were thought to represent tuberculosis spots. So it was used as lung medicine, hence its name as well, Pulmonaria, relating to the lungs. So whilst that's really interesting and it's quite fascinating to look into, it is important for me to say that modern medical herbalists don't base their practice on that. It is an interesting historical aspect. And also that a lot of our Western traditions got lost, so we are refinding our traditional uses of herbs. And a lot of the traditional uses of herbs that we're finding are being supported by modern research as well. Things like hawthorn berries being used because of their flavonoid content in the red-purple colouring of the berries. Well, modern research has found that actually the creamy white flowers have got as much, if not more, flavonoids than the berries. So now we would use the two together, or the flowers, depending. So it is very interesting to watch how modern research backs up and supports a lot of traditional uses. Palette. Okay, so could you list, do you think, 5 different tastes, different flavours?
Do you mean like the sweet, sour?
I do,
Yeah.
exactly.
What is it?
Sweet, sour,
Bitter,
bitter,
astringent.
astringent.
And there's the 5th non-one, isn't that what it is?
Somebody
Salty.
said salty, yeah. So, and I'd add a 6th one with bland. So, in many different cultures through the ages, there are observations that have linked particular tastes with medicinal actions, and now those tastes are being linked with different chemical compounds as we can analyse the plants closer and closer, essentially. So traditional Western herbal model has categorised those tastes into the 5 flavours, and sour is thought to act upon the liver and gallbladder and is the result of the presence of acids. So it's the taste of fruit acids, vinegar, tannins, and you'd recognise it in the taste of a lemon, but also in things like raspberry as well, so a little bit. And stimulation of the sour receptors in the mouth leads to a reflex increase in salivary juices and bile as well, release of bile. Bitters act on the heart and the small intestines, and there are lots of different constituents that evoke a bitter taste, but there could be alkaloids or terpenoid derivatives like a lot of the volatile oils. And some of the well-known bitters might be things like gentian and chicory, dandelion, burdock. Again, things that we can find growing outside. Sweet is an interesting taste because our concept of sweet has changed radically over the years. if you look back to when honey was a rare treat, then sweet was defined as the taste of root vegetables, carrots and parsnips. And you can really think that actually if you get a good carrot and chew it, it's really sweet. But if you go back even further and look at Chinese history, it was once thought that the taste of sweet was white rice thoroughly chewed and held in your mouth. I can't imagine many children today being told that that was the taste of sweet. So sweet tastes act on the stomach and the spleen and the pancreas, and they include a lot of saponin containing plants, things like ginseng and licorice, and plants with lots of polysaccharides. So their pungent or acrid taste has been linked to the lungs and the colon, and can be found in things like ginger, mint, raw onion and garlic, capsicum, mustard, peppers, horseradish, a lot of heating herbal remedies. And so those pungent acrid tastes are used to move things, to heat things and stimulate the circulation, for example. Salty flavours tend to be produced by a high mineral content in the plant, and I'm sure that a lot of you will have in your gardens or have seen around the island equisetum, the horsetail. That has a lot of silica in, and you get a salty mineral taste from it. It makes your salivary glands go crazy if you put some in your mouth. Give it a good chew. So the salty flavour tends to be used, those herbs tend to be used for kidneys, adrenal glands and bladder. It might include things like celery seed and bladderwrack. And as well as that, we can add the bland flavour. Because of the model, it doesn't technically count as a taste, because where it's bland, it's thought of as inactive and neutral in character, so it doesn't have a dynamic action on your body, but it does form a sixth category really. And it tends to be herbs that are mucilaginous and are used perhaps for the bladder. So things like plantain and marshmallow that have got a real juiciness is the wrong word, but gel-like feeling to them almost.
Can you tell me what mucilaginous?
Mucilaginous, it's like a gel-like quality to it.
Like some aloe vera would be.
So like aloe vera or slippery elm would have that kind of psyllium husks. Chia seeds, if you
Chia
put them in.
seeds, I wanted to say if you boil chia seeds, it's exactly like this.
Linseed.
Kind of, linseed even. So when you're making your herbal tea, you've already got masses to think about, and that's before you even think about what kind of therapeutic action you want your tea to have. If you want it to have a therapeutic action, do you just want to enjoy it as a pleasant drink, or are you making it specifically to treat somebody? And then you want to think about your other senses too. What does it look like? What does it smell like? We say that the eyes are the window to the soul. So you want your tea to look nice, a nice glass cafetiere, perfect. Maybe your soul needs a bit of nourishment too. So I rarely use herbal teas as simples, and a simple is when you use just one herb on its own. I might, if I wanted to just have a drink myself in the evening, I might nip out to the garden and get some lemon balm or some mint or a bit of thyme. But generally speaking, if I'm making a therapeutic tea, it tends to be a blend of teas, a blend of herbs. And when you're making a blend, obviously you need to keep the flavour in mind and the different strengths of the different herbs. So for example, lavender is really great for cooling and calming, but it's really quite bitter. So
I was going
you
to
don't
ask you about
need a lot.
that. I had a go at making lavender tea. I nearly puked. It was awful.
Yeah.
So I was going to say, what did I do wrong? Maybe just using it on its own, or too much of the...
I generally speaking would just put a little pinch in with something else.
I didn't do that.
There's nothing wrong with that if you like a bitter taste. I think bitter is a flavour that we've kind of bred out of ourselves. The amount of bitter foods that you can go into the supermarket and buy is really limited, which is a shame. So obviously sometimes the goal is purely therapeutic when you're making a tea, and the best herbs for the job might not be the best tasting. So you've got a choice to make. Do you want to make a tea, or is this a time when one of the other preparations might be better?
Do you think sometimes instinct kicks in as well?
Definitely.
Because I don't like herbal teas,
Yeah.
Usually, but I like herbs,
Yeah.
as part of the culinary side. But I can, from time to time, drink nettle tea,
Okay.
and I bought some green tea as well. And I tried the green tea, and I thought, not so keen on that. And today I thought, I just fancy making a green tea and nettle tea combination.
Perfect.
And I thought, that's quite nice. Although I don't like that type of thing.
I think it's
My wife does, but
I think it's really important to realise that we are all different. We're all individual, our palates are all individual, and you need to taste things and try things and see what works for you and what you like. And a large part of working with the patient is making sure that what you give to that patient is going to be taken. There's no point in me making a bag of tea up and then it's sitting on the shelf for 3 months or whatever.
And the other thing is, I suddenly thought a few weeks back, I fancy getting a herb plant, and a sage plant, and making something with the sage. And I looked at the sort of, I suppose, the chemical elements in it, and I thought, that's exactly what I need. And it was like, that's what I'm asking about instinct.
No, I think
So, it's like, you used to say old wives' tales, if you fancy something, it's because your body's telling you that's what you need.
I think there's a lot of truth in that.
Especially on a summer's day, a nice pint. But no, seriously, it's, it does seem to work that way very often.
Yeah, and I think it's important that we reconnect with that and listen to our instincts rather than accepting the thought that if we are unwell, that there is only one way to deal with that situation, because I don't think that's true. So in terms of a medicinal herbal tea, the typical therapeutic dose tends to be 3 to 4 cups of tea a day. So if you're having a one-off tea or a bit of a taster like we're going to have, it's not going to have a therapeutic action per se. Depending how sensitive you are, some people might say, I really felt that and it really did something for me. In the 2 different schools that I trained, when we were looking at using tinctures, for example, one of the schools taught drop doses and one of the schools taught teaspoonful doses, and I've seen patients react to both. So I think it really depends on the person and what's appropriate for them.
Sorry for interrupting again. I was going to ask about allergies. Are people allergic? Because it seems more and more nowadays people are allergic to certain things to the extreme.
Yeah.
And does that apply to herbs as well?
Absolutely, it does. Yeah, just like any other food. One of the more common allergies to plants is probably to the Asteraceae family, which is essentially the daisy family. And some people get headaches to that or other reactions to it. By the time they come to see a herbalist, though, they've probably already tried chamomile, which is part of that family.
Feverfew as well.
Feverfew, yeah. So they might already know that they're allergic to it. But it is something that you have to consider as well. And also you have to look at if people are on other medication, and what effect that the herbs may have upon that medication as well. So as I was saying, obviously you want to try and make your tea palatable, because people just won't take it if you give them something that they don't like the taste of. So, would you like to taste some tea? Yeah? Okay. So when I was training, we weren't told what we were tasting, essentially. So I'm going to give you some tea, which I haven't brewed. While you're tasting it, if you can let yourself sit quietly with the tea, give it a smell, have a look at it, have a look at the colour, breathe it in, hold it in your mouth and taste it for a while. Notice if it moves at all within your body, what it feels like, how it makes you feel. Does it make you think of anything? Just observe all those things. And then we'll have a little talk about that once you've had a taste.
Intriguing.
Claire, while you're preparing that, can I just ask you, I might be confusing the issue, but a few hundred years ago they burnt witches, didn't they? Or they called them witches because they gathered herbs for medicines and things like that. Because she was saying it goes back 2,000 years or more. There's proof of herbs being used medicinally, and yet we seem to go down at that point, whenever it was. I don't really know. About 300 years ago.
We lost a lot of knowledge at that point. And a lot
was that connected to religion or something that we were?
I think it was a mixture of things. I think it was a mixture of religious beliefs and the advent of, this sounds awful, but I don't mean it in an awful way, the advent of a formalised medical profession.
I was just going to say, is it a control thing? Get rid of.
And that was
a bit
very
like religion took over from natural paganism or whatever.
And I think as well it was a change from a sort of matriarchal system where it was passed on from grandmothers down to a patriarchal medical system where women were excluded initially.
So in fact, as a herbalist, it's fact that we did lose a lot of knowledge there. So are you grabbing it back from other countries, or
we look at it from all sorts of different places, from the records that we can find, things that have been passed through families and people who write about their own family experiences, things like from different countries, and my mind has gone completely back.
Does the Western medicine differ largely against the Chinese medicine and that kind of thing?
There are certain differences. For example, my understanding of Chinese medicine is that they tend to use pre-formulated preparations. As a Western medical herbalist, if you were to come to me, I'd take a case history and then decide which herbs that I wanted to use for you specifically. Whereas my understanding of the Chinese herbalist is that if you were to come with headaches, for example, then they may have a set preparation used for that type of headache.
Sure.
Nothing wrong with that. It's just a different way of doing it.
But you on researching, where there was lost ground in Europe, do you ever find that some of the research from Chinese medicine also, you look into that as well, or do you just keep it specifically to Western?
At the Scottish School of Herbal Medicine, we touched briefly on Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine as well. But most of the focus was on the Western herbs and the Western model of doing it. So yes, I think you can't exclude looking at other practices to gain knowledge.
It's like anything, isn't it? Whether it be exercise or food or herbs,
And there's such a strong traditional herbal use around the world that to say, oh, I can't look at that because it's from a different culture would be silly.
I read something, quite recently, which might be of value, which was in America when it changed really to the patriarchal system, and in the 1800s in particular, some of the very wealthy families like Rockefeller, etc., realised that pharmaceuticals would make them even more money. So they started sponsoring medical schools, and up until that, medical degrees had included a wide range of what we would now call holistic therapies, and then started to dictate the curriculum. So it became narrowed down to active ingredients that you could extract for that. So it's still herbal, but then you mix them with chalk and take them. Why would we do that? It's interesting, isn't it?
It's fascinating. And
if with the cannabis oil, that's what they're doing now. The medical profession are making a synthetic cannabis. I can't quite get my head around that one, but
why?
bizarre.
Because they want to earn money.
It's money.
Well,
yes, it's money.
Absolutely, But why would anybody want to take it when you can get the natural substance?
It's like taking a pill that's got the active ingredient of something that you would give us in a tea.
Yeah.
And we take it with chalk, which has got no value whatsoever, but we think it's...
I think you could even take that a step further and say that some of the ingredients that you could find in capsules actually would inhibit your absorption.
Yeah.
So
it's extraordinary.
It is amazing what we will happily take. Yeah.
Well, because of ignorance, people aren't informed, and they're not informed because it's not in the interest of the people that are making these drugs. And I don't want to go down the negative route, but and so people really, unless they're really interested, like the people that turned up tonight, they just accept what's being told them. It's just ignorance, and it's not entirely their fault. They just choose.
I think we're taught from very young as well that you go to the GP and you get a pill to sort your ailment.
Yeah.
And I think it's about educating and teaching from very young that actually there are lots of alternatives, lots of different ways.
And that's why I get a little bit sensitive about the fact that people think that this sort of thing is very woo-woo, and yet actually it's been there forever, whereas, medicine... Anyway, that's my thing. I think Henrietta was trying to ask you a question.
Could we not use the cups and save the paper?
Yes, I would happily do that. Yeah, great.
They're paper anyway, aren't they?
These are paper,
These are paper
they will compost, but...
It was awful. It's purely my own fault.
So how are we getting on?
Yeah. Well, we're guessing over here. We've got thyme or lemon thyme.
Lime and lemon balm.
It's oregano.
Okay.
Maybe a bit of lavender.
Okay. So we've got a lot of plants of the same family being mentioned, which is quite interesting.
Well, those are the ones we're familiar with, you see. All these others, they're too complicated.
So you're mentioning a lot of mint family plants. They tend to have that square stems to them. Things like your rosemary, mint, lemon balm, thyme. And what else did you notice about this? What kind of flavours were you getting from it?
Earthy.
Earthy, bitter.
Pungent, isn't it?
Pungent.
Yeah, definitely pungent.
An oiliness to it.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Love this. I find it fascinating when you've got a handful of people in the room who don't know what they're tasting, but they all experience the same things. So you've got that common ground that says what we're tasting is the same, what we're experiencing is the same. So there's a truth in it, there's an essential truth to it. I think this tastes quite medicinal. It's got that kind of antiseptic flavour to it. And it is actually thyme. Thymus vulgaris, which has got lots of oils in, lots of volatile oil, lots of thyme oil. And it's much better to use it as a tea or a tincture than an essential oil, an isolated oil, which can be quite irritant to the mucous membranes.
It's funny you should say that. The minute I drank it, I wanted to sneeze. And I suffer with sinus issues.
Okay.
So the minute I started, I'm now sniffing.
Well,
So.
apologies.
No, it's fine.
You have to grow yourself some time. Yeah,
That's
exactly.
quite interesting to
So the minute you said it
verify
irritates
that,
the mucous membrane, and then I hadn't got a clue what it was. I've got a terrible sense of taste and smell, but I knew it was going to irritate it. My sinuses have been irritated,
Well,
or agitated, or activated, whatever you like to call it. So I don't know.
I recommend it for people who've got coughs and
Yeah,
colds.
if you've got a blocked nose,
essentially.
it'd be quite good. Yeah.
Blocked noses, lots of mucus, stuff sitting in your lungs.
Inflammation.
Yeah, that thyme oil acts directly in the lungs and helps to shift all the phlegm and stuff that's stuck, kind of moving. And it's really antiseptic right in the lungs as well.
I had to work hard not to sneeze.
Is it just thyme?
It's just thyme, that's a simple.
Gosh.
So
Gosh,
nothing
and it's
else.
not a lemon thyme, it's
Not
just
a lemon thyme.
Just thyme.
Thymus vulgaris.
So what could you mix that with to make it more palatable then?
Well,
Not that it isn't palatable.
it goes very nicely with licorice in the syrup.
Right.
Yeah. And obviously the syrup also helps soothe your throat.
Yeah.
And it helps to move things and shift them up out of your lungs as well. So yes, a really easy to do home preparation. Most of us have got thyme at home in the cupboard for cooking with. And if you haven't got it in the cupboard, you might have it in the garden.
Yeah.
Nice simple preparation.
Could you mix it with lime tree blossom?
Yeah, why not?
I could imagine
Yeah.
that this would give a wonderful taste.
So tilia and the lime tree blossom is used as a
When you have fever.
when you have fever, and it also opens the peripheral circulation, so it would help it travel through the body and really diffuse.
And sweat, you can sweat
Yeah.
easily.
Yeah, and it's a really calming plant herb to take as well. So what else can I
Does it matter if it's very hot when you drink it, warm or cold?
No, you could take it any of those ways for thyme tea. I think it's more palatable warm.
Warm, no problem. Yeah.
But you could certainly keep it cold for maybe 24 hours in the fridge and drink it cold before you'd want to make a fresh batch.
But generally speaking, no more than a day.
Yeah.
To keep it
Typically,
cold.
yeah.
Thank you.
And it's a good question, because there are some herbs that you would specifically want to take either hot or cold, like sage, for example. You wouldn't want to be drinking hot sage if you had menopausal hot flushes, for example.
I won't take
No.
it.
You'd want to drink it cold.
What would you take if you had menopausal hot flush?
You could take sage,
Oh.
but you'd drink it cold
Oh, I see.
and not hot.
Right.
So it is worth looking carefully at what you're taking and doing a bit of research, rather than just saying, I found a single source that suggests this might be useful for. I think Google is very much at our fingertips, and it's very easy to say, I can treat this by taking that. And you do have to exercise a little bit of common sense and caution.
So if one was interested, because it's quite interesting Henrietta, what was that you mentioned? The
Lime tree.
Sorry?
Lime tree blossom.
So how would you get hold of lime tree blossom? Would you buy
I
it
tell you
dry?
where. New church. Forest.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So,
Bill and I, we go always in connected there.
okay. So is there a good book you can recommend that says, rather than going to Google, for the layman that just wants to make good teas that help them?
A good, simple go-to book, which is in a sort of dictionary format, which gives you the plants to look up and also various common ailments to look up as well, is a book by Thomas Bartram, Bartram's Encyclopedia of Herbal Medicine, I think it's called. It's very simple to use and gives you the basic, simple remedies that you can use with
Yeah.
obvious cautions and.
Yeah, I think you've given us some in that leaflet anyway. haven't you? Yeah.
So how much did you use? How do you work out the quantities? Especially if you're doing it for somebody and you're using several herbs, how do you decide, 50% of this and 20% of that, or and then how much do you use per water? How much water? Yes. Sorry, that's a lot of questions.
It's a good question. So in terms of
I guess.
in terms of the dose of the tea that you would be making for yourself, on average, typically, it's 1 teaspoon of dried herb per cup of hot water and infused for 5 to 10 minutes with a covered lid. Typically, if you were going to use fresh herbs, you want to do double the amount of fresh herbs, roughly, more or less.
Oh, that's useful.
Some herbs are bulkier than others. So, for example, dried marshmallow leaf is very fluffy. So you would have less of that on a teaspoon than you would if you were using a fresh leaf. And also if you're making a blended tea, if I was putting marshmallow leaf in, then I might need to look at how much marshmallow I was going to put in order not to give you a whole carrier bag to take home, and for you to be able to get some of the other herbs into your tea mix.
Can you overdose on herbs,
Yes,
as it were?
yes.
Right.
Herbs are medicines,
Yeah.
So it's like any other medicine. There are herbs that you could overdose with, but the typical herbs that you find in your garden, generally speaking, the culinary herbs, tend to be pretty safe to use. So there is a lot that you can do as a layperson in terms of looking after your own health. But as I said, it's worth doing your research, because if you were to make yourself something with foxglove, for example, then you would have problems.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You could potentially cause yourself a lot of
Yes.
problem.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, anything that gets used in culinary terms is
Like you
safe.
say, if it's dried, it's concentrated, so you have to be careful. It's a teaspoon. But if it's fresh, then you'd have to use quite a lot in comparison. So
It depends on the plant that you're using and the quantities you're using, and also the person taking them. So the dose for a child is going to be different to the dose for a 6 foot something athlete. You've got to judge it case by case, I think. Yeah. Does that answer?
Yeah, yeah.
And did I fully answer yours? Yeah.
Is this a different one?
This is a different one completely. So if you've got any dregs left and want to wash them out, please do.
You're going to go and wash that up?
Or pour it into another cup.
No, I finished mine.
Okay.
Do you want me to wash that up, Danny? Do you want me to get you another cup?
Yeah, is that alright? I'll start sneezing again.
Maybe you've got something to sneeze away, relieve.
I think it's called an encyclopedia.
There you go.
And
Easily done.
I want to sneeze. Thank you.
If you Google Thomas Bartram, it'll come up.
So is the Culpepper's herbal still a useful reference?
It's an interesting reference, yes.
Interesting.
I should think it's quite
Oh, I'm sorry. Dripping water
got a leak
everywhere.
there. Should think it's quite intense, isn't it? Written back then, it would be quite heavy going.
The language use is different.
Yeah.
The terminology and the way things are explained is different.
Right.
But certainly there's interesting information there that can be used. So yes. And that's the other thing to say is that the pharmaceutical aspect of looking at herbal medicine is a bit two-edged, because it means that there is more research being carried out on plant medicine. So we are being we're getting more and more information and becoming better and better informed about the plant medicines, which is no bad thing.
No.
Especially as the big pharma, it turns out, is failing more and more. You know,
I think
I'm really happy that we are going back to all this plant wisdom.
I think it's important that we learn to use medicines for ourselves.
Yeah.
I think that there are a lot of constraints within the medical system that we have upon those that work within the system as well,
Yeah.
which means that they don't necessarily work the way they would like to. And being self-employed, I have the freedom to work how I would like to and take the time that I would like to take with my patients.
And no restrictions from the EU, rulings of you can't do this and you can do that. And
There are some restrictions over herbs that can and can't be used, and there are some restrictions around conditions that can and can't be treated. So any notifiable disease, for example, or cancer, I couldn't treat cancer, and I wouldn't claim to treat cancer.
But surely there's a lot you can do for the conditions of the body which may have cancer. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot that can be done to support a patient
Support
who
it.
has a diagnosis of cancer.
Yeah, there's actually, I know it from Germany, many really fantastic remedies. They had to put everything down,
Yeah.
because the big pharma had the big invention that everything had to be tested and tested and tested, and all these little firms wouldn't have enough money to get them tested, so all this medication is lost forever. And it's a lot already.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
The legislation about what you can and can't do.
Yeah.
I'm allowed to treat a patient if I've had a consultation with them. So a consultation means that I need to meet you face to face and have a conversation.
Yeah.
I can't make up a herbal tea that I know to be good for phlegm in the lungs, for example, and sell it as a cough tea. What I can do is say this tea contains herbs that have traditionally been used for, they've got a long history of use, and make sure that I've got the evidence for that should anybody ask me for it.
So it's
and sadly, with the modern medicine, pharmaceuticals, there's so many medicines they produce that then have nasty side effects,
Yes.
and potentially you might even have to take something for that nasty side effect. Whereas with herbal medicine, where you're dealing with person one-to-one, you're getting it right, presumably most of the time anyway, I like to think. So you're not having that risk of, you're going to have a side effect by having this chemical pumped in.
I would
Yeah.
very hope not.
Yes and no, because now with the glyphosate from Monsanto, they find out that first they said it cannot be spread. Now they hang out containers where they collect evidence and find out even where they did not put out glyphosate, you can find it already. So this would also be for you. You give out a tea, you didn't put the glyphosate on it, and it can be already on the plant. And I find it's outrageous. Outrageous. I'm really happy that Monsanto is losing our buyer now. I mean, nobody can understand how they could be so stupid to take over Monsanto. Everybody did know what is going to happen, And I'm really happy because they lost 2 processes already where they have to pay them millions of compensation. It's really very, very good.
So for me, that comes back to using organic wherever you can, with the understanding that that's the best that you can get.
Yeah, but
Or biodynamic.
but even then, they managed to get this glyphosate
Everywhere.
already everywhere.
Yeah.
Even if you do organic, it could be on your plants.
So
What is it?
Glyphosate, it's a weed killer,
Oh.
which Monsanto invented because they have their wheat, and many Indian farmers committed suicide because they did buy all this wheat to seed out, but they cannot reseed it. You can only harvest it one time, and then the seeds they would not reproduce. And then they invented this weed killer, which killed everything around, but they were claiming it doesn't do anything, which was a big lie. Glyphosate is a big cancer. It produces cancer, and they always denied it, but now it comes out how true it is, how dangerous it is. And we are poisoned everywhere. The Isle of Wight Council is using glyphosate.
Roundup.
This is Roundup.
Exactly.
Yeah. They are using it for spraying on all the streets, all the weeds, and so is used, you know, and we are being poisoned.
So you must get your supplies dried and fresh. Tell us how you...
I don't get fresh herbs.
Right.
I get dried herbs and tinctures, or powdered herbs. But I don't buy them fresh. They wouldn't last long enough. Because it's like any fresh food, it would go off very quickly. But I think is one of the things that we can do is to try and limit our consumption of additives and preservatives and colourings and chemicals.
And informing
Broad umbrella.
that people get to know of these dangers.
Yeah.
Because many people are not really aware what is going on. And I think that we are all getting poisoned, you know, and nobody is protecting us. The state is failing in England and everywhere in the world. And us people, we are disappointed because we see how
I think
much we
really,
have been
Henrietta,
deceived.
it's quite a depressing subject, and I hear what you're saying, and I think it's got to be talked about, but not necessarily right now. But I think it's up.
Sorry.
No,
yeah.
no. What I was going to say is, at the end of the day, it's down to the individual to find out for themselves, to take responsibility for their lives and what they put in their mouths or what they use on their body. Which is why we have this group here and bringing in wonderful speakers like Claire, who are so knowledgeable. And it's up to the individual to turn up and see if they want to improve their lives or not. We can't make people understand what's going on around them. So, but we can try some more tea.
Absolutely, you can try another tea. Okay, so again, I'm not going to tell you about it. If I could have a couple of volunteers again with pouring, that would maybe be helpful. If you want to keep your,
spotty one.
maybe if you keep your cup, and then I'll give you some teas to pour out.
Do you want me to help? We've got a couple of girls. And there's one there. I can't. I'll just organise it. Sit here and stage manage.
Again, it's really hot, so please be careful.
It's a different colour, isn't it? Yeah, I won't tell you what it looks like. Can't taste it at all. No, what's it taste like? I've never tried that. Do you? I'm sure it is. Do you grow your own?
Yes.
Your garden looks so immaculate. I can't imagine you've got metals in your garden.
It's quite close.
Well,
to Chelsea,
before
isn't it?
we used to have just a little area.
Yeah. But how do you contain it? Because they like to grow, don't they? Skull cap.
Tell me you
We've got nettle so far, but I haven't even tasted it. Just
Oh, actually, it doesn't taste like it smells. The smell was worse.
Yeah. Smells
So again, just sit with it quietly, smell it, look at it, taste it, hold it in your mouth, see what you feel, see what you experience.
It's a bit like a wine tasting, isn't it?
It is.
Hold it in your mouth. Yeah. You're not going to sneeze, Danny.
Not really good with tea.
Not with this one.
It's nice.
It's got a very cleansing taste to it. It feels like it's cleaning me.
It's a bit greenish. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm? No.
no.
That green is strong.
No,
You know chamomile immediately, don't you?
So what do
Calendula.
Okay, so calendula.
We've got nettle over here on this side of the room. Anybody?
What do you notice about the tea rather than what plant you think it may be?
Lemon balm.
It's very yellow.
Okay.
Do you know it tastes a bit woody?
It's like my throat feeling a bit rough.
Oh, interesting.
It's not astringent. It's
It's quite drying.
yes.
Ah.
It is quite dry and quite astringent. It's got a fair amount of tannin. Okay.
Yeah, it's sort of woody, so
Bit
that
woody.
would go with what you're saying, that sort of dryness, yeah.
Okay.
Is it dandelion?
It's not dandelion. So this is a herb that has antispasmodic actions and is calming to the nervous system.
Oh.
It's used for conditions with high blood pressure and with cholesterol issues as well.
Can I have more?
Yes.
Lovely.
And it's been found, researchers found that it has a specific action on the heart. It seems to increase the blood flow to the heart muscle itself, quite specifically. So it increases the flow of blood through the heart by improving the condition of the heart as a muscle itself, without changing the number of beats per minute, as it were. It is hawthorn. Hawthorn.
The leaf or the flower? Or?
This is the leaf
That's why I thought it
it's
was
leaf
woody.
and flower. And that smell that you get at the beginning, people often say it smells a bit fishy. And
Didn't smell nice, I didn't think it was fishy, but as it cooled down, the smell went.
yeah,
And it didn't taste as it
it
smelled.
doesn't taste like it smells at all.
No, it doesn't.
It
It's
smells
quite
like
different.
water.
I think it tastes quite smooth, quite
Taste is good.
quite a pleasant.
I thought it was more
taste.
palatable than the first one, once I got to
Yeah.
drink it, yeah.
The first one, the thyme, is quite a medicinal
Yeah.
taste, whereas this is quite smooth and drinkable.
Again, could you, well, you can mix it with something.
Absolutely.
What would you partner it with it, you know, sort of commonly speaking, you know, what would be a good
So
one?
again, it completely depends on what you're trying to do. But if you were wanting to drink it as a daily tea, for example, you could marry it up with particular flavours that you enjoy, things like lemon balm, the lime flower, nice, gentle, pleasant tasting herbs that you would drink it as a daily tonic. Why not?
That's what I didn't like about
Lemon
the
verbena.
green tea is the smoothness of it.
Yeah.
And that's why I married it up with the nettle that I don't like.
Okay.
But so that's got the same sort of like smoothness, but not
Yeah.
quite.
Which is why I think it's important that people taste things. They taste the herbs, find what they like, and then mix and match as you would when you're cooking. You find what you enjoy and you make little variations on it. Why not do that with your medicine?
So if you needed to take that for a particular reason, then you put in something that you quite like the flavour of. That's what you're saying. Not to disguise, but to.
I'm saying if I had a patient who needed to take something and didn't particularly like the flavour of what I was asking them to take, I would try and put something into my prescription that made it more palatable, so that they would want to take the medicine. Because there's no point otherwise if they're not going to take it.
And that would be the individual taste. Once you've had a one-to-one, you find out the kind of things they like.
Yes.
And you add chocolate to it for me.
I think there's a certain amount of trial and error.
Yeah.
And if a patient comes back to me and says, I've taken the herbal tea, but it was disgusting, I'm not going to make them the same blend again. Unless they said it was disgusting, but it really worked. It really worked, so please give me some more. Yeah. I think it's important that we enjoy what we put into our bodies.
Can the chlorine in tap water have a negative effect on the medicinal qualities of the herbs?
I think purifying your water, remineralising your water, using filters on your water is a good thing.
Like the Brita water filter?
No.
I have seen a litmus paper test done on different water filters, and the Brita water filter actually made my tap water more acidic than it was originally.
Really?
So I didn't want to drink that.
So would you use normal tap water or bottled water or?
I'm really aware that I don't want to be plugging companies. I think that there are lots of different types of filters around, whether it be ceramic filters or different jug filters, and it's worth researching. It's probably as far as I'm prepared to
So
go.
you're not going to share the secret of which one you use?
I can tell you that what we use at home is a Biocera filter.
Sorry?
Biocera is the name of the filter. Yeah, but there are lots of different filters around.
And is that on tap?
No, that's in a jug.
Oh, right, okay.
And what does that do to the water?
So it alkalizes the water a little and takes some of the impurities out, some of the chemicals out.
So just purely boiling water won't do anything much.
I haven't
Distilling it
specifically looked into the science of it, so I couldn't say with any certainty. But I would doubt that you would be removing a lot of the chemicals that go into our water system. I think.
You just get hot fluoride.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
How do you spell that, please?
Oh goodness. Biocera, I believe. I think a search would put it up. Has anybody got any other questions?
What's the time would the herbs be picked? Is there an optimum time that they are?
So that's a good question. Yes, there are different times that different plants are picked. Some of them relate to when the plant's in flower, for example, or if you are using root, then you may want to pick at a certain time of year when all the nutrients have been drawn back into the root, or if the plant's in seed, if you're after the seed. So yes, there is also biodynamic farming, which might also look at moon phases and things like that. In terms of the plants that I use, I tend to just buy from organic growers as opposed to biodynamic growers. I haven't really questioned why I do that, so maybe I should. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Do you also give advice what food people should eat or?
Yes, absolutely. Dietary advice, lifestyle advice all plays a big part of a herbal consultation.
Yeah.
And quite often you find that a lot of simple changes to what people are doing changes their health dramatically. We tend to overeat certain food groups or fixate on certain food groups. Rely on them a lot. You might find people eating the same foods 3 times a day, 7 days a week, and you think, well, okay, we can work with that. Introducing other foods, just broadening the nutrients that people get as well, makes a huge difference. I sometimes think that nutrition is as big a part of herbal medicine as looking at the medicinal action of the plants. Yeah, definitely. Anybody
I've got a
else?
question.
Yeah.
If I went into, let's say, Morrison's, but there are other supermarkets available, if you don't want to advertise, and I got a little pot of sage or parsley or thyme in the little that you would get, that's the same stuff.
Broadly speaking, yes.
And if I made tea out of that, it would taste like that, would it?
This is probably fresher, probably. I can't tell you how long a supermarket keeps a dried herb on the shelf or in the warehouse, and optimally speaking, a 6 months to a year time frame for using a dried herb would be great. But yes, there's no reason at all why you couldn't buy chamomile tea bags or your thyme or rosemary or whatever it was that you wanted from a supermarket.
So my second question would be, we've got a cupboard full of, I think they're made by Twinings, like lemon and ginger. Is that just a flavoured tea bag, or is that lemon and ginger?
Without looking at the tea bag, I couldn't tell you.
Right.
But if you cut one open, have a good look.
Have a good look.
And also,
Will I see a lemon in there?
On the well, you might find bits of lemon peel, but if you look on the packaging, it
It'll
should
tell you how much is in it. Yeah. Right.
And obviously, when you're looking at tea bags, you're looking at things like, are the tea bags bleached? Are they in nylon thread, plasticated tea bags? And loose herbs, ladies and gentlemen, fresh cup teas.
For some obscure reason, I found out the other day, and then maybe I was a bit slow finding out, that tea bags actually have aluminium in them as well. Why? I don't really know. I'm not quite sure.
Plastic.
But yeah, so if you can get an unbleached, but I think as you're saying, dried herbs is the way forward. And where can we get our dry herbs if we go shopping?
So you've got places like Easy Way.
And so that's a good place, is it?
Yeah. And you probably, in the health food shops, you would probably find certain loose teas, or your local herbalist. And if you weren't local to me here, then if you went to the National Institute of Medical Herbalists website, you'd find across the country on map where to find your local herbalist. Look them up. Useful people.
So if we're going to make our own tea, it's best to try and buy loose dried stuff from either yourself or a good
or grow it in your garden.
Or grow it in your garden. But then you've got to dry it and go through all that.
No, use it fresh. Why not?
Well, I do
How
that.
do you know you're getting a tea bag that's not got plastic and aluminium and things in?
That's what I was going to ask, because I had some organic tea, herbal tea, so like the lady was asking.
I think unless you research the company and look at what they're using to make it, you'd have to be quite proactive in chasing down the quality of your tea bag.
But I think the way to get round, if it's just ordinary tea, is just to buy loose tea leaves.
Loose tea leaves.
At least you get a tea leaf in a tea bag. All you get is the dark.
Red bush tea loose.
I'm sure you can buy red bush, black tea, green tea.
Red bush tea leaves.
Just linings.
Oh, that's an idea.
What's in it?
I've not thought thought of using a cafetiere.
Cafetiere.
Oh,
Nice.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is. Yeah, yeah. Anybody wants to know where Easy Way is, not trying to take business away from Claire, it's in Newport.
Pile Street.
Yeah, pastry. Yeah.
And it makes much fun to go and collect it yourself. It's really fun.
Yeah, that's true.
It's part of the medicine, I think.
Yeah.
Loose tea
I
leaves.
collect
Foraging
my
generally.
lime flowers and elder flowers and peppermint.
Mm.
And it's really nice.
Yeah. Any more questions for Claire?
Do you use any psychotropic things in preparations at all, or is that a banned?
No, I don't.
No, okay.
Well,
Can they be used?
we have a list of restricted herbs that only herbalists are allowed to prescribe. Some of those might fall under that category,
Yeah.
but I don't think that they're always necessary.
No.
I think it's a bit like jumping on the big guns before you try the other alternatives. Yeah. I think there's a lot to be said for taking time to heal yourself, taking the
Yeah.
yeah.
I
Did you
think
get better?
To get better.
I think one of the things you said earlier really struck home, you know, when you were talking about taking the time to make the tea and have a nice pot in, you know, specifically for your herbs. I do that now, and I think it was because I was reading a book and it was about the the Japanese tea tradition of making tea and that, and I thought, actually that sounds really nice, and it is very therapeutic, and you feel like you're nurturing yourself while you're doing it, rather than, you know, grabbing a cup of something from the local cafe on the run, you know. So
I think for a lot of people that's the only moment they have during the day
Yeah.
for themselves.
Yeah.
It's like a mini meditation.
yeah,
Um,
and I have a little bone china cup, and I just keep topping up. And I particularly like ginger tea, but that's a preference of mine. But you know, just keep sipping it, and it's just lovely. Mm. Any more questions for Claire? No?
Anybody want more tea?
Yes.
There's more.
So that's it. If there are no more questions, I'd just like to thank Claire for coming tonight. And I actually think I'd like to thank all you guys as well, because you're all very well informed. You've all, you know what you're talking about, and it's made it a really interesting discussion. Would you agree? I think it was
lovely. Thank you.
It really has been a lovely evening. So thank you to Claire.